And with our mind settled in the present, putting aside thoughts of the past or future, other places, other activities, and so on. Leave all those aside for now so that you can be as attentive as possible to what we're doing in this class. And refresh the motivation you generated earlier today, bodhicitta motivation, wanting to benefit other beings as much as possible and not do harm to any being as much as you can, and work for enlightenment, awakening, to be able to benefit all beings in the best possible way. I think that's your reason for being here. So for the meditation, we are looking at patience, the practice of patience, the perfection of patience, actually. So this is the Bodhisattva's practice of patience. And the main type of patience is learning how to not get angry at and retaliate when someone does harm, either to oneself or to those we care about. So learning to be patient with harmdoers. So in last week's class, we looked at one method for developing this kind of patience by thinking that someone who does harm isn't really in control of themselves. They don't have self-control. So bring to mind a person that has either harmed you or harmed another person or other people that you care about, either in the past or maybe it's going on in the present. And ask yourself, is this person completely in control of their mind? What's going on in their mind? So we might think that they do, but according to Buddhism, they don't really have control over their mind. So the way the mind works is that there's lots of seeds of afflictions, like attachment, aversion, ignorance, and so on, all these afflictions, disturbing emotions in the mind. So those have existed in the mind, our minds, and this person's mind as well, from beginningless time. So the mind, that mind has never been free of afflictions. And when afflictions arise, they leave seeds for further afflictions to come up in the future. So in this person's mind, there are lots of seeds of afflictions from their past lives and also from this life. So they have a long habit of those afflictions coming up in their mind and then taking over their mind and acting them out. And then when there's some object, a suitable object to trigger the afflictions, then those seeds get ripened so that the afflictions arise in the mind without choice. I mean, nobody by choice gets angry and wants to have harmful thoughts. It's just an automatic situation that happens in their mind. And there's other factors as well, like erroneous conceptions, certain conceptions, ways of thinking, maybe things they learned as a child, growing up in their family and in their society, their country, and so on. So lots of things have affected that person's mind in the past and also in the present. Things going on in the present have affected that person's mind, caused them to think in certain ways, mostly erroneous thoughts that aren't in accordance with the reality, the true nature of things, but are deluded, mistaken. So these are things, conditions that cause this person to become afflicted, maybe angry, hateful, and then have harmful thoughts. And they probably don't know any counter forces to the afflictions. They may not have learned how to manage afflictions in their mind. And so the afflictions arise, they're really strong, they take over, and the person is just like acting them out without choice or control. So think about that and see if that makes sense. And it could help to think of a situation where that's happened with us. So we've probably had experiences like that where causes and conditions come together and strong afflictions come up in our mind, anger, hatred, and then we act out those thoughts without choice or control and do harmful things. Also, mental afflictions are kind of like mental illness. They make our mind crazy. And when a person is mentally ill and people are trying to help that person, they usually don't get angry and hateful towards them. And instead they feel, oh, we have to help this person. We have to get them help from psychiatrists, from medications and so on, so that they can stop being in that situation of mental illness and acting out those those kind of thoughts. So in the similar way, if we think that a harm-doer is like that, is like someone who's mentally ill, and how it's more appropriate to treat them with compassion and kindness and try to help them instead of being angry and wanting to hurt them. So that's one way we can work on our anger towards harm doers and tame our anger so that we don't get taken over by it and then want to act it out. So that's really important, and we can also generate compassion for them. So the slides, we could put the slides up. So we're still on Lama Tsongkhapa's text, the great treatise on the stages of the path. So we're sort of taking a segue from the middle-length text and looking at the great one, which has a lot more information on how to develop patience, how to overcome anger and hatred. So Lama Tsongkhapa made lots of outlines of these different methods for working on anger towards harm doers. So last week we looked at how how to work with the object, thinking about the object of the anger and how it's not justified to get angry with regard to the object. And then we also looked at, that was point number one, which was on a previous slide. Point number two was analyzing the subject. So we looked at that as well. And so that's where you look at yourself, you're the subject who's getting angry at this harm doer, and how we have created the cause to experience problems. So because of our past karma, doing negative actions, we are now in this situation where we are on the receiving end of harm. Or also we could think about how, due to our karma, we are in this world where there is so much suffering and problems. Buddhism talks about different realms of existence, different places where beings live, and there are places which are much more peaceful. No war, no fighting, no killing, no violence. People just not people. Well, I guess in some cases, yeah, there's one human world. I think it's the northern continent, which is very, very peaceful. But then the higher realms, the Deva realms, as you go higher and higher in those realms, things become more and more peaceful. Beings, at a certain point, they don't even have anger. There's no more anger, there's no more non-virtuous actions. They never kill or steal or lie or do any of the 10 non-virtues. So why are we here and not up there? It's not that someone put us here. There's not a creator that put us here, but rather it's our own karma. The creator is ourself, rather our past lives, the actions that we did in past lives put us here in this situation. So if our karma was better, if we had created more virtue, less non-virtue, we would be in another world. So it's because we created non-virtue in past lives that we're in this world where there is so much harm and violence and anger and so on and so forth. So yeah, just thinking about that, thinking about our own karma also helps us to reduce anger or get rid of anger towards those who do harm. And I was thinking about how, I think probably most religions and spiritual traditions and philosophical systems and so on talk about how, it's not good to be angry and hateful, act in harmful ways, but they may not always give reasons why. Yeah. So I'm sure, when we were brought up, we were told not to be angry, not to be hateful, not to hurt, but maybe weren't really given reasons for why we should be that way. Of course, there's the adage, like the golden rule, don't do to others what you wouldn't want them to do to you. So that's a really good, a good way of thinking that, oh yeah, I wouldn't want anyone else to do that to me, so I shouldn't do that to them. But sometimes, yeah, what we're told may just make us feel bad. Yeah, like it's bad, it's wrong to get angry and harm others. And then that can cause us to feel bad and guilty when we do get angry and act in harmful ways. But in Buddhism, there's all these like methods that involve thinking, contemplating, analyzing, and coming up with good reasons why we shouldn't get angry, why we shouldn't harm others, and how to work with our mind when our mind does have these kind of thoughts. How to challenge our thoughts and to see errors in our thoughts and then learn to think in a different way that are more positive. So I think that's really empowering for myself. That's really empowering when I think about all those reasons why it's not good to get angry and act out thoughts of anger. And then I get to the point where I feel I really don't want to do that. It's coming from here. It's coming from my heart, my mind, rather than because I've been told. Yeah, and people will be angry at me. They won't like me if I act this way. But really, from my heart, I feel no, I don't want to be that way. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be hateful. I don't want to harm. So that's much more powerful. Yeah, when you get to that, it takes a while, especially some of these reasons that, might take quite a bit of thinking to become convinced of it, but it's worth putting in that time and energy, contemplating these things again and again and again. And they really do become part of your way of thinking. So then we're now at the third outline, which is analysis of the basis. Anger is unjustified. It's unjustified. So the term basis here doesn't really explain, but it seems to refer to our body. Because our body is the basis for experiencing suffering when someone does harm us. I guess it could be our mind as well. Because if somebody says hurtful words, they say nasty words to us, they insult us, they criticize us, and so on, then they may not be harming our body, but our mind, there's suffering in our mind. So anyway, our body and our mind are the basis for experiencing suffering, when someone else is doing harm. And it seems that the basis can also refer to something like a stick or any object that a person might use to hit us and cause pain, cause suffering. So that could also be a basis. So here then we're analyzing the basis or bases and seeing that anger is unjustified. Okay, so there's 2 points here. First, analyzing the causes of harm and where the fault lies. So I'll just read from the book, page 165, if you have it. And so here he's quoting from Shantideva, a guy engaging in the Bodhisattva deeds. It's kind of halfway down the page. So from Shantideva, his sword and my body are both causes of suffering. He obtained the sword, I obtained the body. At which should I be angry? If, blinded by craving, I have obtained this abscess with a human form, so painful that it cannot bear to be touched, with whom should I be angry when it is hurt? So he's talking about a situation where somebody harms us with a weapon, like a sword or a stick or anything, a rock, so whatever somebody picks up and throws at us or hits us with. So the other person is responsible for the weapon, which is one of the bases for us suffering. But we are responsible for this body, right? So we have this body, this physical body, which experiences pain when it's hit with a weapon. Okay, so the other person is responsible for the weapon, but we are responsible for this body, and we have this body as a result of karma and afflictions. Okay, so the 12 links, that whole cycle of how you create karma, and then at the time of death, craving and grasping arise, that ripens that karma, which then becomes the cause for the next life. So at the end of our previous life, that happened, craving and grasping, wanting a body, and that ripened a karma. It must have been a good karma that we have a human body rather than some other kind of body like an animal or a hungry ghost. So it was a good karma that put us into this life. But still, it's contaminated karma. It's not like totally pure, contaminated by ignorance of the true nature of things. And so this body is subject to suffering, right? It's very, very kind of fragile and sensitive. I think about how, if you take a little, something even tiny, like a little pin or a needle, and you stick that any place in the body, unless it's an acupuncture needle, those aren't too painful. And also the way they do it, very gentle. But, a bigger needle or a pin or something stuck anywhere in our body, we have pain, right? So we're so vulnerable. We're so, just ready, ripe and ready to experience pain. And then inside as well, you eat something that doesn't agree with you, or something is going on inside, there can also be pain as well. You do a yoga posture too strongly, or you sit too long, or whatever. There's pain, right? So it's like our body is just so vulnerable to experience pain. So we are the ones who put ourselves in this situation because of our ignorance, because of craving, because of our karma from the past. We're not free of all those contaminations of all those negative things. And so, here we are. And then if somebody gets angry at us and wants to harm us, it's probably because we did harm to them in a past life. We did something bad to them. So there's this karmic connection, karmic debt that we have to that person. And so, it's like this is paying back our karmic debt. Not to say that it's right, that it's good for this person to come and harm us, but we are partly responsible for this situation to be here. And yeah. And also, so we each of us, oneself and the harm doer, are, have a part to play. We're both partly responsible. And so the harm, we're not saying, the other person is right to come and harm us. So they also have afflictions in their mind and bad karma that motivates them to want to do harm. But if we compare the two sides, the two persons here, and the responsibility for this situation, whose is greater? Who has greater responsibility? So in Geshe Sopa's commentary, he says, us, our responsibility is greater. He says, ignorance and so forth cause us to create karma. As a result, we are born with a body subject to harm from other beings and also from elements like, heat and so on. The human body is so fragile that even a tiny insect bite causes us grief, right? So now we have a lot of mosquitoes around, and also, we haven't seen too many yellow jackets this year, but, those, It's early, yeah. So there's also those kind of other creatures that bite and sting. Yeah, so we can so easily experience suffering. And then he says, so at whom should we get angry when this body is harmed? When we seriously examine the situation, we find that the greater fault lies with us. The primary responsibility for our pain is having taken rebirth in this kind of body. And then he talks about how, if you have a wound on your body, right, big open wound, and then you go to a place where there's a whole bunch of people who are kind of really rowdy, like, maybe at a concert or something, people are just, dancing and pushing each other, and there you are with this big wound on your body, and you get bumped, and that hurts, right? Causes more pain. So he says, this is our own fault for going into that situation. We could have said, no, I'm not going to go there. That's not a good idea. But if we go into that situation with this big wound on our body and then we get hurt, we can't blame the people who are there, right? It's our fault for going there. And so, although this analogy isn't exactly the same as our situation in samsara, because we don't really have a choice, we don't have conscious, deliberate choice about taking rebirth. It's more we're sort of thrown by our karma and our afflictions into this life. But the point is that we have the main responsibility for being in a situation where we can be harmed by others' actions. So the point here is that it makes more sense to blame not the other person who picks up the sticks and hits us, but blame, I don't like to say blame ourselves, but blame the causes of being in this situation, blame the karma and the afflictions, especially ignorance, that are responsible for us being in this situation. And so that helps us generate renunciation. Like, I really have to get myself out of this situation. I have to free myself from karma and afflictions and ignorance. So that's what we need to do. That's where the responsibility lies. So thinking in that way, it takes a while to contemplate these ideas, but if you think that way, then it really helps you to not be angry at the harm doer and have patience, fortitude, forbearance with them. There's one more verse from Shantideva in this section. He says, if some people out of confusion, harm others, while others in confusion get angry with them, who is blameless and who is to blame? Right? So the other person is driven by their karma and afflictions to do something harmful. But if we just react with anger and then want to retaliate, then we are also being driven by our karma and afflictions and just creating the cause for more. We're creating the karma to experience more of the same, just remaining in this cycle of suffering. But now we have the opportunity to change things, get out of this situation. So if we can remain patient, have fortitude, not react with anger, do something else, even like Shantideva says, turn to stone, become like, no, not like stone, wood, like a piece of wood, just don't react. And then work on the mind to not have anger and hatred. So that's analyzing the causes of harm and where the fault lies. And then letter B is analyzing your commitment. So this has to do with precepts we have taken. So I'll just summarize what Shantideva says. So I think all of us have taken refuge in the three jewels. And when we take refuge, in our tradition, there's these, they're called commitments, they're guidelines that we're supposed to follow. And one of those, with regard to the Dharma, taking refuge in the Dharma, is to not harm any sentient being, right? So as soon as we take refuge, we're taking on that commitment to not act harmfully to any sentient being. And then when, we also have the option of taking precepts, vows. So there's lay precepts, and those are mostly about not harming, like not killing, not stealing, not lying, and sexual misconduct, and so on. So if you take those precepts, then again, you're making this commitment to not do harmful actions to others. Then monastic precepts, we have many more. We promise to avoid lots of other actions that are harmful. And then many of us also take bodhisattva precepts. So those are all also about not harming others. So the point here is that if we take on these commitments, we have to remember them. We have to keep them, right? Otherwise, it's kind of lying to our teachers, lying to the Buddhas, saying, I'm not going to harm, and then, going out and harming. So that's not a good thing to do. So we need to keep in mind the precepts that we've taken, the commitments that we've made, and also generating bodhicitta. If we, like every morning, we do that, hope to do that, generate the thought, I'm not going to harm sentient beings, I'm going to help sentient beings, I'm going to work for enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So these are commitments that we have made, so we need to remember them and then really do our best. Of course, we make mistakes, but we have to keep trying, clear up the mistakes that we've made and keep going and keep trying. And then in the book, Lama Tsongkhapa talks about how it's wrong even for hearers, or Shravakas, those who aspire for their own liberation from samsara. So they're not taking on the responsibility for all sentient beings, but just getting themselves out of samsara, getting themselves to nirvana. So even hearers shouldn't get angry and retaliate, right? So that's wrong for them. So all the more so for those who are striving for enlightenment, for the benefit of all sentient beings, who are inspired by the Bodhisattva ideal, trying to practice the Bodhisattva path and work for enlightenment. So this is something we are inspired by and we've made commitment to, so we need to remember that, keep that in mind, and not let ourselves go against that by doing anything harmful. I think that was the main point there. Okay, then the next point is showing that compassion is appropriate. So I'll read from the book, page 166. So he says, contemplate from the depths of your heart. All living beings have been in cyclic existence since beginningless time, and there is not one who has not been my friend and relative, father, mother, and so forth. So we've had these connections, these very intimate connections with every sentient being. This was spoken by the Buddha. He said he can't see anyone who hasn't been our mother, our father, our brother, our sister, and so on. So we've had all these relationships with each sentient being from beginningless time. Then he says, being impermanent, they lose their lives and are miserable due to the three types of suffering. Right, so we're all subject to impermanence, changing moment by moment, but also dying. Each lifetime we die, and then we're reborn, and then we live, and again we die, and we're reborn. So we keep going through those experiences again and again. And the three types of suffering, suffering of change, happiness that isn't long-lasting, disappears after a few seconds, doesn't remove our suffering. And then pervasive suffering, being under the control of karma and afflictions, not free, but like being in prison, locked up by our karma and afflictions, stuck in samsara, trapped in samsara. So it's really good to contemplate the situation of sentient beings. And he says, crazed by the demon of the afflictions, they destroy their own welfare in this and future lives. So as we saw before, nobody's really in control of their mind, but it's rather the afflictions that control the mind. Afflictions and karma and, causes and conditions just cause afflictions to come up, and then this tendency to do harmful actions, non-virtuous actions, and so on. And so in that way, beings keep creating the cause to experience suffering again and again and again and again. And he says, I must generate compassion for them. How could it be right to get angry or to retaliate for harm? Okay, so this is what's appropriate. Not anger, not hatred, not the wish to make them suffer. They're already suffering. That's really helpful to think that, someone who's doing harm, even if they seem to be in a really good position, like they may be a billionaire, a millionaire, in a position of power, a celebrity, lots of fame, lots of people know them, they're famous, and so on. So they may look like they're in a good position, but if we think about what's really going on in their mind and in their lives, they have suffering, especially in their mind. Because having lots of money, having lots of power doesn't necessarily bring happiness. And what happens too is, people desire those things. They desire wealth, they desire power and fame and so on, thinking that's going to bring them happiness. But then when they get them, they discover that it's not really satisfying. Those things don't really bring happiness. And you may reach the top and you've got nowhere else to go, right? And you're still not happy. And so then it must be very frustrating. The Dalai Lama tells a story. He was once, probably in America, he was invited to the house of a very wealthy person, big, beautiful house, and he needed to use the restroom. And when he went into the restroom, he said, and there he saw a big bottle of antidepressant pills and a big bottle of sleeping pills. So that was really, clear to him that, yeah, you can be very wealthy, but, still have suffering, being depressed and having trouble sleeping. And then there's, of course, cases of people who commit suicide, or kill themselves with drugs or alcohol. So, how did I get there? Yeah, so, so beings who do harmful actions are suffering, not happy. And so thinking about that, thinking about that person's mind and that person's life, what's going on in their life, and recognizing they're not really happy. Also, as long as you're in samsara, as long as we're stuck in samsara, there's no real happiness. Whatever happiness we have is temporary, short term. It comes to an end. And then we're, just back in the wheel of life. So these are really helpful thoughts to think, because it's not so easy to develop compassion for those who do harm. It's easy to have compassion for the victims of harm, people who are, on the bottom and experiencing a lot of suffering, especially if they're being harmed by others. So that's not so difficult to have compassion. But for those who are doing harm, those responsible, the perpetrators, for them it's very hard and takes quite a bit of time to contemplate and think about these things, especially if we are we are the ones experiencing the harm. But I think, contemplating these thoughts are very helpful. And for me personally, I find it helpful to read about, hear about cases of people who have experienced harm, but don't get angry and retaliate, and instead are forgiving and even have kindness and compassion for their harmdoers. For example, like the Dalai Lama, of course, and the Tibetans, many of them experienced incredible harm, incredible suffering at the hands of the communist soldiers and police and so on, but were able to maintain compassion. And there's also this book, I think it's called The Wisdom of Forgiveness by Victor Chen. We have copies of that here. And it tells about some of these stories. So one is, there was this boy in North Ireland, and as a child, during, I don't know, did they call them riots, or what did they call them? The Troubles, I think. The Troubles, during the Troubles. He was shot in the eye with a rubber bullet by a policeman and lost his sight. I think, he became completely blind. And he said, he wrote a book about his experience. I think I read it. And he said his greatest sorrow was that he couldn't see his mother anymore. He wasn't able to see his mother, and a very loving mother. But he didn't feel angry at this policeman who shot him. And later, when he was an adult, he actually reached out to that person. And the person, I don't know if he was still a policeman or not, but anyway, that person was kind of reluctant to meet, but they eventually did meet and had started having a relationship and became friends. And so that's just so inspiring. You know, he said he never felt angry, even as a child, as a boy, he didn't feel angry, and then grew up, and he still had a wonderful life, even though he was blind. Very happy person, very caring person. So the Dalai Lama actually met him. I think he went to Ireland and they met and had some conference together. So this is such a beautiful example of forgiveness, non-anger, vengeance, being vengeful. Is that such a word? Having revenge, yeah. And I also once watched a film about, I think it was about reconciliation, efforts for reconciliation. And there were some amazing stories in there as well. The one that just really, wow. It was a woman in Rwanda, and she lost 5 children in the troubles there. It was genocide, actually. I think that's the appropriate word. So 5 of her children were killed. She lived in just a small village. And one day, this man came to her and said, I am the one who killed your children, and I want you to forgive me. And she was so angry. She said, get away. But he kept coming back. And he said he really felt bad. He really felt a lot of regret for what he did. There was this massacre. A whole bunch of people had gone into a church to seek refuge. And these guys went in with machetes and guns. And they just killed hundreds of people, including children. So he was one of those crazy people. And he said he really, really needed forgiveness from her. So finally, after I don't know how many times he kept asking, she realized that continuing to be angry, yeah, she was angry, she was hateful, but she thought, this isn't any good. This isn't good for me. It's not good for anybody. So finally she said, okay, yes, I forgive you. And they actually became friends. He would come and help her with things around the house and so on, and give her rides on his bicycle. So they kind of had a relationship. So I thought, that is really extraordinary, because that must be the most painful thing. Losing children, 5 children, and they were murdered, yeah, totally avoidable. So to forgive the person who caused that amazing suffering, that is amazing. So if she could do that, right, I'm sure we can find it in us to forgive people who insult us or bump us or step on our toes, or things that are much smaller, much milder than what she went through. So I find that helpful too, just to know there are other people who can forgive, and I can do that too. And it's so much better as well, because if we don't forgive, that means we're hanging on to anger, hatred. And is that a good thing to do? Does that make us happy? Does that bring joy into our life? No way. So it's a cause of pain. It's like, having a knife in your heart, or holding on to hot coals in your hand. So it's just totally ridiculous and useless to hang on to anger and hatred. So however difficult it may be, however much time it takes, it's worth doing, working on finding forgiveness. And that will enable us to have real peace and happiness, and also compassion. Any questions so far? There's more, but to give you a chance to ask questions or make comments, share stories. Venerable Sangye.
I know that I had a really hard time with the whole thing about the stick, how it's the basis, it's the secondary basis, but having the body. And so I finally kept thinking about that analogy and realizing that our afflictions are like the major condition, and that we're the ones pushed by them that then receive the harm. Could you just unpack that analogy a little bit more? I've always struggled with it, but then I see the value of looking at, because it's the basis, the whole idea about the stick and having a body. Is there a way for you to just?
Mm-hmm. I thought that was one of the things.
But it breaks it down on why the stick is the.
Yeah, that was last week.
Oh, okay.
Analyzing the object. It comes under the outline, analyzing whether the harm is direct or indirect.
Okay. Because I have always been so averse to that analogy. It took me a while to really understand the importance of of seeing that there's a substantial cause and there's a cooperative condition on why things happen.
Well, I think, yeah, that analogy, so for those who are not familiar, it comes in Shantideva's text. He said, if somebody hits you with a stick, do we get angry at the stick? And of course we don't, because we say, well, the stick didn't hit me by itself. It was the person who picked up the stick and hit me. So the point is, it's actually the stick that causes us pain, right? The pain is caused by the stick, but it was wielded by a person. Okay, so that's like indirect. Let's see, what is indirect? He said, if you're angry at the agent of harm that directly inflicts the harm, so what directly inflicts the harm is actually the stick. Yeah, the thing that directly harms us is the stick, so we should be angry at the stick. That's the thing that causes us pain. And the person is indirect, right? That's like the indirect cause of the harm. But we say, but no, the stick didn't hit me by itself. It was the person who picked it up and hit me. So then Shantideva says, well, what impelled the person? It was the anger, hostility in their mind. So afflictions in their mind, anger, hatred, the wish to harm, that's what impelled the person to pick up the stick. So just as the stick was wielded by the person was wielded by or controlled by or impelled by their afflictions. So what we should blame, instead of blaming the person, we should blame their afflictions. We should blame those thoughts in their mind, those afflictions in their mind, which we have as well. We're not free of them. And so, so what we should get angry at is the afflictions. Blame the afflictions.
I've just found that to be, after it's been explained many, many times over the years, I finally understand the power of that analogy. So I just wanted to make a comment about that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that is to help us separate the person from their afflictions and their actions, and blame the afflictions, blame the actions, but not blame the person, because they're not permanently picking up sticks and harming. There's other times when they're holding a baby and, being kind, feeding a puppy. So people aren't permanently under the control of their afflictions and acting out their afflictions. It's just something temporary, something conditional, causes and conditions. So thinking in that way, and that's how I understand it anyway. Yes. Wait, we need the microphone. The green light should be on.
I think now.
Yeah.
Hello. Good morning.
What's your name?
Elton.
Elton. Okay.
Yeah, so sometimes like I do want to forgive and like do my best, but it's not a felt body sensation. You know, sometimes like I forgive and my whole body responds to it, but then this anger keeps coming. Maybe you can you speak about a little bit about that and why it keeps happening?
Well, I think it takes time because these are new ways of thinking. You know, our old habit, what we've been doing all our life and also in past lives, is being angry and fighting back, getting back. And also we're encouraged, yeah, by people. Lots of people encourage us. Society encourages us. The media encourages us, you know, to act that way. So there's a lot of support for getting angry and retaliating, and there's not a lot of support for being forgiving and letting go. And also it's not our habit. It's not something we've done very often, so we're just not familiar with it. So it takes time. It takes time to change and learn these new ways of thinking, new ways of feeling. So I think gradually, the more that's why we need to contemplate these things again and again. Once isn't enough, 2 times isn't enough, but 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, again and again and again, which is what meditation is all about, is making ourselves familiar with positive ways of thinking, positive states of mind. And the more we do that with our mind, then the more it will start to permeate not just the mind, but our whole body as well. Be able to feel it in our body. So it takes patience and persistence, and keep doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's also good, like, to be with like-minded people, right? Try to be with people who are patient and forgiving and loving and compassionate. If we hang out with people who are, getting angry and fighting back, then we're easily influenced by others. Yeah. So if you spend more time with forgiving, kind, patient people, then that will help you to be more like that as well. And also the media, things that we look at and read and expose ourselves to, that also has an effect on us. So try not to play video games where you're destroying people and things. Yeah, expose yourself to information, sources of information that are helpful for being more kind and compassionate. Watching videos of people taking care of other people, taking care of animals, being kind. So that will help as well. Okay, so then, next slide, more outlines. Okay, so this is the second big outline under how to stop reacting with anger towards harmdoers. So this is it's quite long. Stopping impatience with those who prevent your praise, fame, or honor, or with those who have contempt for you or say offensive or unpleasant things to you. And this has 2 parts. First is stopping impatience with those who prevent 3 things: praise, fame, or honor. And then 2 is stopping impatience with those who do those 3 things to you: have contempt or say offensive or unpleasant things. So we'll look at the first one on the next slide. And again, that has 3 parts. Stopping impatience with those who prevent 3 things: praise and so forth. So the 3 parts are reflecting on how praise and so forth lack good qualities. 2, reflection on how praise and so forth have faults. And then the need to delight in those who prevent praise and so forth. So this is talking about a situation where we correctly or incorrectly think that somebody else is obstructing us from getting things that we want. The things that we want are praise, fame, and honor. Okay, so does that sound familiar? Praise, fame, and honor. Our old friends, the 8 worldly concerns. So these are big attachments that people tend to have. We want to hear praise, people praising us to our face, behind our back, and so on. We want fame. We want everyone to know how wonderful we are. And honor, we want to be treated with respect and so on. So these are things that we have desire for, and we may think that someone is an obstacle to that. Someone is obstructing us from getting those things. And so this could be a cause for us to be angry, to have anger and hatred at such a person. Has that ever happened to you? Any in your past life? Okay, so how to deal with that? So the first point is reflecting on how praise and so forth lack good quality. So this is, again, relying on Shantideva. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, when others praise you and spread your fame, it serves neither of 2 purposes. For this life, it does not bring you long life, health, and the like. And for future lives, it does not bring merit and so forth. So why are we so attached to praise? Why do we like praise? Does it really help us in this life? Does it help us in future lives? So this is what we need to check. You know, what good does it do that people praise? It just makes me feel good. It makes my ego be happy. So therefore, then he says, therefore, do not get attached to fame and praise, but reproach yourself by thinking, my displeasure when my praise and fame are ruined is no different from when small children cry upon the collapse of their sand castles, which lack any of the requisites for a dwelling. Yeah, so when we're kids and we're on the beach, we make these creations like sand castles, and then the tide comes in and washes them away, all our hard work. But why are we so attached to those sand castles? I mean, do they help us? Do they benefit us in this life? And these, this is actually from Shantideva. So the verses from Shantideva say, praise, fame, and honor do not cause merit, nor longevity, nor cause strength, nor health, nor bring physical well-being. Once I understand my own welfare, what meaning is there for me in those? And also, when their sand castles collapse, children cry in great distress. Likewise, my mind is childish when my praise and fame are ruined. So this gives us something to contemplate when we're in that kind of situation, and it seems like someone is interfering with other people praising us. Telling people, don't praise, don't say those nice words to this person. So if we feel angry about that, upset about that, then we can ask ourselves, well, what good does praise do? If I get praise or I don't get praise, what's the point? What difference does it make? So it's just pleasant words, but pleasant to our ego, to our self-centeredness, self-importance. I am the most important person in the world. Everybody should praise me. Everybody should like me. Everybody should admire me. Say nice words to me and not nasty words. Everybody should notice me, how wonderful I am. So this is our ego. This is our self-centeredness talking. So do we want to be run? Do we want our mind to be under the control of our self-centeredness? Do we want our life to be under the control of self-centered mind? What good does that do? Yeah, so it's just the ego. So I think that's not so difficult to recognize. But, it takes a while. Again, it takes time to unlearn. That's a very deep and long-term habit that we have, not just this life, but from beginningless time, we've been involved with self-centeredness. And this is one of the biggest hindrances to the path, especially the Bodhisattva's path, to become enlightened, where we want to, move away from that and care about others, be more altruistic, and eventually get to the point where we're more concerned with others than ourselves, and eventually not concerned about ourselves anymore, but just totally dedicated to others. So it takes time to gradually change that, but any opportunity we have to recognize this old habit of self-centeredness coming up, rearing its ugly head, then this is one situation where that might happen. Yeah, and here it's just saying, well, look at praise. Why are we so attached to praise? What good does it do? It doesn't help us this life. It doesn't create merit for future lives. And our attachment to praise will interfere with our happiness in this life and virtue for future lives. Okay, the next point is reflection on how praise and so forth have faults. So he says, develop disgust for praise and so forth, thinking, praise, fame, and honor distract my mind with the meaningless, destroy my disenchantment with cyclic existence, make me jealous of those with good qualities, and spoil my virtuous activities. So Shantideva says, praise and so forth distract me, destroy my disenchantment, promote my jealousy of those with good qualities, and destroy all that is good. So I don't think the problem is really praise, but rather attachment to praise. If we're attached to it, if we're affected by it, still get kind of happy, excited about it, that's the problem. But it doesn't mean we should try to stop people from praising us. Yeah, well, some do. Yeah, there's some. There's stories of practitioners who just stay in some isolated place, like a hermitage, a cave, and they don't come out and meet people, so they don't have opportunities to get praised. And they hide their good qualities and even pretend to be crazy or something to make sure they don't get praised. So there's some who act like that. But others, like, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Venerable Thupten Chödrön, they're out there. They teach, they write books, they do interviews, so they're not hiding like some practitioners, but they're out there actively working to benefit others. And so they're in a situation where they can receive praise, but not attached to praise. They're not doing those things because they want to be praised, they want to be famous, but doing those things out of compassion, out of altruism, out of the wish to benefit others. And you can use it, right? If you have fame and praise and so on, that can be useful to then, more people find out about the Dharma through your activities. More people learn about these wonderful methods for transforming the mind, finding greater happiness, creating virtue, getting on the path. Okay, so you can use fame, praise, and so on to spread the Dharma, benefit sentient beings. So I don't think, the point isn't to try to avoid it, but use it. Not be attached to it, not seek it and grasp at it, but use it. Venerable Kunchok has a comment or something.
That makes me think of, it reminded me of Mathieu Ricard, who wrote a book on Patrul Rinpoche. And the book is called, I think, Enlightened Vagabond. And it's a collection of stories on Patrul Rinpoche, and it's very, very good. And one story that really stuck with me was, at one point, Patrul Rinpoche was giving a series of teachings, and he received a letter from another Lama that was praising him extensively, and he got furious. He got so mad. And then he stopped teachings and he left, and he disappeared, I think, for a couple of weeks, because he wanted to make sure that his mind wasn't being corrupted by all this praise. And he really was meditating and looking very carefully. And then at some point he came back and resumed the teachings, but he disappeared for a while. Really, really wanted to make sure he wasn't being corrupted. I thought it was a really good story.
And his whole way of being, he was a Rinpoche, and so he was heir to the previous Rinpoche, so he had a labrang, a monastery, but he decided to leave. He didn't want anything to do with that, and even though he was a monk, he didn't wear robes. He wore this old sheepskin chuba, so he looked like just an ordinary old nomad. So people would see him and they, just sometimes people would say, "Oh, Patrul Rinpoche is coming to give teachings," and he's standing right there, and they don't recognize he's the one until he gets up on the throne, and then he realizes, oh. So his whole way of being, way of living was to be simple and ordinary and avoid praise and fame. But he got it anyway, because of his incredible practice and realizations. Okay, maybe, Sal, pass the microphone back.
I guess my question is, if we do get praise, how should we respond to it?
I don't think it's good to get angry. I mean, that story, maybe the anger was in his mind, but he probably didn't scream and shout and insult the person who wrote that letter. So that wouldn't be nice, to get angry. Stop that, shut up, don't say that. And just make the person feel bad. So I think you just have to really watch your mind and try not to let it inflate you, get blown up like a balloon. Wow, I'm really wonderful. So try to not do that, although it's not easy. And just be kind to the person. What else? Any other? Venerable Jigme.
I think at first, for some people that believe they're so terrible and they never do anything well, that it's helpful to actually let the compliment in and actually integrate it with kind of who they are. Otherwise, they just discount it, and that's not me, and you're wrong, and they put all their energy into that, and then their esteem suffers. So,
yeah, that's a good point, and that reminds me of my experience, because I used to think I was terrible, and then when people would praise me, "Oh, you're such a good nun," or "You're such a good teacher, you've helped me so much," I would say, "No, it's not true, it's not true, it's not true." I mean, I didn't say that out loud, but internally. And yeah, it is important to overcome those kind of habits, to think I'm terrible. Tibetans don't seem to do that. They don't, yeah, they don't seem to have that problem of hating yourself, criticizing yourself, beating yourself up. So this is a very prevalent problem in the West. So if you do have that habit, it is important to not, beat yourself up and think, oh no, I don't deserve this praise. It's not true, it's not true, it's not true. So yeah, to be aware of what's going on inside and think, well, maybe it is true. Maybe I do have some good qualities. Maybe I can be helpful to others. And take that in, but without becoming proud. Yeah, we also don't want to go to the other end of being proud, arrogant, I'm so wonderful. So somewhere in the middle between hating yourself and thinking you're the worst person in the world and thinking you're the greatest person in the world. So just realistically, yes, we all have good qualities. And especially if we are practicing Dharma and, working on ourselves, trying to be a good person, helping others and so on, just accept that. That's true. I do have those qualities. I do have those abilities, because then that gives us encouragement to do more, to keep going in that direction. Well, somebody noticed that. Yeah, somebody noticed that I'm helpful, and people are benefited by what I'm doing. So I want, that's good. I want to do that. I want to benefit people. So I want to keep going in this direction, keep doing those things. So that's a healthy way of accepting praise and thanks from others. So we just have to be really careful, stay in the middle.
I think one way that can keep us balanced is to remember dependent arising, that we may have some information, but we have that information because we learned it from our teachers or from books from previous teachers.
Yeah, really. Thanks for reminding me of that. Because when I did my first book, How to Meditate, that was a long time ago. And then people would, oh, you wrote that. Oh, that's so fantastic. Oh, it helped me so much. And I would remember, well, whatever is in that book, I wasn't born with it. I didn't come into this world knowing that stuff. I learned it from my teachers. So many people have helped me to learn those things, and probably past life karma to be able to write it and so on. So that's really helpful as well, to not, it's all me. But yeah, I depended on so many people to get to that point where I could do that book. So like I pass the thanks on to my teachers. It's from them. That really helps. Chuni.
Venerable Children tells the story of having the same dilemma of what do I do with this thanks, and she talked to Alex Berzin, who was her friend, and Alex looked at her and said, "Say thank you." And I have personally used that a lot. It's very simple. I don't have to make a big deal about it, or oh, I'm so great, or a big deal about oh, I'm so terrible. But simply to acknowledge the kindness of the person who's recognized virtue or had some appreciation, and let it just sit there. Just thank you is enough.
Yeah, and also giving praise is a good thing. It's actually one of the bodhisattva vows. One of our bodhisattva vows, secondary vows, is giving praise to those who have good qualities and do good things. And so, so we should appreciate that and not make them feel bad. But saying thank you, then that encourages them to continue doing something that's good for them. It's a positive thing. So we don't have time to go on in the book. We'll continue next week. But if you have any last questions or comments, you had your hand up at one point. Venerable Kuncho.
And just to add to what Venerable Sepal just shared, I asked this question to Venerable Chodron when traveling because sometimes she would give teachings and like hundreds of people would bow, and like I've seen people crying out of gratitude and all that stuff happening. And I asked her, like, how do you work with your mind so that you don't get all like full of pride and stuff? And she said very often because I noticed she was lowering her eyes when people were prostrating and doing stuff. And she visualized Lama Tsongkhapa at her heart, or her teachers, just like you said, because she told me everything that I just shared, I didn't know anything about that. This is all coming from the Buddha or Tsongkhapa. This is not coming from me. And that was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, when I first went to Singapore and I'd have people bow to me, I was like, freaked out. You got it wrong. No. It was like, I don't deserve this. So, but then I thought, but it's a good thing for them to do. I mean, if they can see good qualities in me and want to bow to me, wow, that's amazing. You know, I don't want to stop them from doing that. That's a virtue. That's really virtuous, you know, to have that respect. Because they're not really bowing to me, but it's the robes, what I represent. And that's, you know, the whole Buddhist path and teachings and everything. So I shouldn't stop them from doing that. So then, yeah, I would just think I'm passing this on to to others from whom I learned the teachings.
Another one is I do offering, like offer it to the Buddha, so that they can have the connection with the Buddha as well. So if they bow or they praise anything, you offer it, then they get that connection with the Buddha.
And wasn't it, you said in Newport, somebody bowed to you in Newport? Not full length, just some guy with a baseball hat with a flag on it. I didn't say MAGA, did it? Anyway, somebody went this. That's really cool. In Newport.
Venerable Chuni, do you remember when we went to Taiwan and we were in the train station and two people came up and down on the floor and bowing to us, and it took everything I had not to either run away or start saying, stand up, you know, what are you doing? It was so unusual. But like Venerable said, you know, and you said, it's to the robes. They didn't know us. Yeah. So that was very helpful.
Yeah. And it's beautiful, you know, that people could do that in the train station. Yeah, it's like, just so much devotion, incredible devotion, beautiful. So we should rejoice. Wow, amazing. Okay, so that's a good point to stop. So let's dedicate the merit, the positive energy.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Gurana Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow, May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.